clinic. If you've just joined us, I was mentioning earlier that we've started with a new software today, and we've had a few technical issues despite much testing prior to today. Some people are having issues with audio. Some people came into the event earlier than we were ready for, so apologies for that. We're going to go ahead, see how things go. If there are any hiccups or you can't hear us, we'll make sure that everybody gets the recording later, so you'll still have access to the Q&A from today. As usual, before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick introduction to the ICCP for anybody who isn't familiar with us. I'll introduce today's panelists, and then we'll get into questions. We've only had a couple of questions pre-submitted today, so if you do have questions on your mind, please send them through the chat panel on the right-hand side, and we'll see if we can answer those for you. Okay, so an introduction to the ICCP. What is the ICCP? Well, we are a professional members organisation, and we recognise those with skills, qualifications and expertise in the professional management of construction claims. We have three main objectives, and those are to establish international professional standards for the management of claims, to give recognition to those who have gained appropriate knowledge and experience in the management of claims, and also to help and educate those who would like to gain this experience. So on to membership. We have three levels of membership: associate, member and fellow. Each level comes with a defined set of criteria that must be met in order to join at that level. I'm not going to go into the detail today, but safe to say associate level is our entry level. So generally that would be to studying, perhaps graduates, those who are new to the world of claims, who are really trying to build up their knowledge and expertise. And we really encourage associates to keep building their skills, their expertise, and eventually be able to join as a full member. At the other end of the spectrum, we have fellow. This would be your highly experienced and qualified, been around the block a number of times professional, and that would be the most stringent set of criteria. I'd also just like to highlight that we offer concessionary fees. So depending on where you reside in the world, there would be a 50% concession on fees across the board: application fee, annual subscription fees, and renewal fees. So do have a look at membership. I'll pop the link to the membership pages in the chat box later. So if any of that sounds interesting, have a look and let me know if you have any questions. There's the links if you'd like to find out more. So our website, my email address, and also the membership email if you have direct questions relating to membership. So on to today's panelists. We welcome back Bill Bordill and Mark Watson. Bill is a quantum and dispute resolution expert. He's director at Decipher Consulting based in the UK. He has 35 years experience in construction engineering. As well as his many fellowships and memberships of professional organisations, Bill is also a fellow of the ICCP and sits on our steering committee. Then we have Mark. Mark is a self-employed construction claims practitioner. He's also a delay analyst, acts as an expert witness and mediator. In addition to Mark's memberships, he's also a fellow and sits on our steering committee. So the clinic's now open, and I'm going to hand over to Bill, who's going to take the first question for us today.
Okay, thank you, Nina, and welcome from myself to everyone. We've only got two questions today. I'm going to deal with one and Mark's going to deal with one. So my question is relating to bills of quantity. There is a project with a bill of quantity description for 1 hour fire rated blocks and a quantity of 250 square meters. However, the drawings show 200 square meters of 1 hour fire rated blocks. And the question is twofold. It says, what happens if there is an instruction to change to 3 hour fire rated blocks? Bearing in mind there's a difference between the quantity on the drawing and the quantity in the bill of quantities. Well, it depends on the contract. If the contract is a remeasurable contract, such as a JCT with quantities, then the builder gets paid for the quantity built. If it's a lump sum contract, such as a JCT without quantities, then the builder gets paid for the quantities on the drawings, unless there is a variation. So it's quite simple. If it's a lump sum contract, it's adjusted based on the drawings, and that's a contract where the contractor takes the risk. If it's a remeasurable contract, it's adjusted based on the bill of quantity, and that's where the employer takes the risk in the quantities. The second part of the question asked, what happens if all of the blocks are omitted? Is the price adjusted by 250 square meters or 200 square meters? Well, if all of the blocks are omitted, then it's the total in the breakdown of the price. That would be the amount in the bill of quantities. The quantity is actually irrelevant at that point if the whole lot is being taken out. So what does the purpose of a bill of quantities serve on a lump sum contract if the quantities have no relevance? Well, the quantities only have relevance as far as progress payment applications. It enables assessments to be made of the work in progress, but it's not the bill of quants that's adjusted in terms of the final account and the pricing and variations. It would be the quantities indicated by the drawings, because that's the risk that the contractor holds. Now, I appreciate that quite a lot of our listeners today are not familiar necessarily with JCT contracts. So the FIDIC alternatives, I understand the yellow, silver and gold book are design and build contracts and therefore lump sum, whereas the red book has a remeasurable and a lump sum variation or option. So it really depends on the wording of your contract and also how the contract might be amended, because sometimes contracts are amended to add further clarity, usually confusion, to how this matter is dealt with. So remeasure, just to recap, a remeasure is contractor gets paid for what he's built, whereas a lump sum is a contractor gets paid for what's on the drawings, and that's where the contractor holds the risk. So I hope that's answered the question for you, Mumtaz. If it hasn't and you've got further queries, please either throw them up on the chat or you could send an email to me via Nina and I'll address that separately as well. So thank you. I'll hand over now to Mark. Well, I'd like to hand over to Mark. Not sure where Nina's gone to.
Yeah, I'm here, Bill. I think Mark's just switching on his camera and
is he? Okay.
Microphone. Yeah.
There we go.
I'm here. Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's construction clinic. I'll be responding to a question sent in by Stuart Robin. Question, lengthy question, and for that reason, I've split this question into 3 parts and responded only to. The first part of Stuart reads, my project is a donor-funded government project in Vietnam, in which the contractor has a construction works contract with the employer signed on 25th December 2014. The project is now 90% complete. The contract is implemented under FIDIC general conditions for and insurance to the employer. Version printed 19 with significant adjustments per conditions of the application. The bill of quantities of the contract consists of 13 bill items, in which of works, 1 and 2 of mechanical and electric works. It's a reissue contract. However, 2 M&E bills contain mostly lump sum unit cost items. All pay items are subject to adjustment, lump sum items, and overheads and profit included in the pay items. Before proceeding question, it's important to understand the characteristics of a remeasured contract, a provisional item, a cost sum item, and a lump sum item. Now, the characteristic of a remeasured contract is one where the design or the type of works can be described in detail, but the quantities cannot be described in sufficient detail. For way of example, this led to excavation works where the quantity of excavation required is difficult to assess until after the works have begun. An alternative characteristic of a remeasured contract is the design needed in sufficient detail for the bulk quantities to be produced. In this circumstance, standard forms of building contracts would normally provide for a prime cost sum item or a provisional sum item. Both relate to estimates made for certain costs in the absence of exact figures, but are applied. So the prime cost sum can be allowance for the supply of work or material by a subcontractor or supplier that will be nominated, whereas a provisional sum is an allowance specific aspect of the works is not yet defined in sufficient detail, tenders to accurately price those other work. It's also important to note that provisional sums are replaced by evaluation of the work actually done as the project progresses. To that extent, the project price increase in respect of those provisional sum items. On the other hand, lump sum items, the contractor accepts the pain or the gain. In other words, if the contractor executes the work at a price which is higher than his tendered amount, he absorbs additional costs. Correspondingly, the contractor executes work at a price which is lower than his tendered amount, then he gains that savings. So the project price would not increase those items. And it is for this reason that lump sum cost items are often priced to consider risks. They tend to have a bigger markup attached to them. I'll turn to the second part of Steve's question. It reads as follows. The employer approved issuance of variation orders to replace some of the M&E equipment, which is mechanical and electrical equipment, which are lump sum unit cost items. The CPA requires a contractor to make a cost estimate if there are no bill of quantity items exactly the same in the contract, items in the variation. In this regard, the conditions of particular application, sub 52.1, specifies all variations referred to in clause 51 and any additions to the contract price which are required determined in accordance with clause 52. For the purposes of this, as varied work shall be valued as follows. While the conditions of particular application, sub clause 52.1c specifies if rates and prices or variations are neither set out in the contract in Vietnam, then the rates and prices shall be proposed by the contractor and evaluated by the engineer and submitted for approval. At the same time, and the conditions of particular application, subclause 26.1, that the contractor shall conform in all respects with the provisions of statutes, circular company law, regulation or law of any local consultant agencies in relation to execution, completion, and warranty of the works. It's quite a mouthful that. So, whilst I don't have sight the CPA Construction contracts such as FIDIC generally provide for variations to works. And such variation clauses generally allow for an increase or decrease in the quantities of work contract for the work in the contract. However, they also provide a clause with that omission. So some that will state if they omit work for the contractor, it can be undertaken directly by the employer's subcontractor. And for that, consider the wording and amendments in the contract and under the same. Now, some variation clauses empower the employer to fix rates for the varied work. However, I would need to look to see to establish those exclusion clauses under the contracts. The parties are bound by the provision of the contract regardless of whether it may be unfair. So the contract and the parties to the contract are bound. Clauses are mentioned, subclause 26.1, subclause 52.1. So say a provision or law in Vietnam, you cannot have a profit costing 10% or 20%, and you have got to comply that in terms of subclause 1. Okay. Turning to the third part of Stewart's question. What are these variations? The contractor argues that the contract service portion is remeasurement plus but the contract mechanical and electrical portion is sums, and therefore principles of lump sum contract shall apply to these two M&E bills. Unfortunately, the original lump sum bill of queue item included significant markup for the contractor, i.e. circular 200% overhead and profit, which now by the employer doesn't accept the same markup for the variations. The employer only accepts the local regulation overhead and profit. It means circa 10% at remeasured contracts. It doesn't seem fair on the contractor, but the conditions they require new cost estimations for all. Can the contract that the principles of the lump sum contract apply to a remeasured contract or the variations under the mechanical and electrical of this contract? Now, again, a contract doesn't have to be impossible to follow the substantive requirements as set in the contract. Now, some principles apply to those items price basis. However, this will not detract from the project being procured on a remeasurable basis, nor detract from the employer's right to the work to accept or reject those costs relating to those variation works, particularly in those circumstances where the contractor allows the employer rates for the various works. So under the contract in Vietnam, overhead should not exceed 10%. If the contractor could advance an argument that 10% overhead applies to the remeasurable and not to those items that are lump sum cost items. Alternatively, the contractor could circumvent this by linking it out to the local regulation and build its lump sum price by including a price for risks associated with those lump sum items. It will require a compelling argument because the employer has 200% studies. Nothing prevents the contractor from building up the price to include for those risks that he makes a provision for in some item. The employer, on the other hand, in order to circumvent that 200% markup, he could vary the works and request the contractor to provide a provisional sum for those previously priced on a lump sum basis. This will allow the employer to vary as it progresses, and it will limit the excessive 200% markup which the employer deems. However, to contract that 200% markup could be reasonable in terms of the risk. Now, the key conclusion in this matter would be transparency, open communication, and reasonableness. And if the parties don't communicate openly and transparently, approach this matter with a reasonable attitude, then this could be heading for a dispute. But then a right or wrong answer here focuses purely on what would be reasonable in the circumstance. I trust I've answered the question, and I'll hand back over to Nina. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. And thank you both for submitting those questions. We did have a few people message me letting me know that the audio was very broken and the connectivity wasn't great. So I'm not sure how much of that response you actually received. We'll make sure that the recording goes out. We'll check that the audio is fine in the recording. Hopefully it plays back smoothly. And if not, we'll make sure that we have written responses for everybody, so you at least get the benefit of those answers. We have a few minutes left, so if anybody has any questions for Mark or Bill, please send them through the chat box. In the meantime, I just wanted to let you know it's the end of July, so we have the non-member newsletter going out shortly. There's some great content in there this month, including a new video that we've just put together, which highlights some of the benefits of membership. There's also some technical content, new articles, opportunities for CPD. So if you're not on our mailing list, make sure that you sign up. There's a link on the homepage. And if you are, hopefully you'll have a few minutes to read that. The next clinic will be in 2 weeks' time. So the clinics are every 2 weeks now instead of weekly. So please do try to join us for that as well. And we'll try and have these connectivity issues sorted for you by then. Right, let me just have a quick look at the chat, see if any questions have come in. Okay, no additional questions. So I think for the very first time, we'll have an early finish today. So thank you, Bill and Mark, for your time today. Thank you to everybody for joining us. And we hope to see you again in the clinic in a couple of weeks. Thanks. Bye-bye.